Hey guys, my name is Miska and welcome to Overwatch Central. Today we're taking a closer look at some of the changes that have hit the PTR servers recently. As someone that plays a whole lot of tank myself, I think a lot about these changes and about what needs to be kind of done to get the tank roll to where it needs to be. And funnily enough, actually, this patch arrived on Tuesday night, for me at least. And the day before, I'd actually recorded a video already with kind of a wish list for patch notes that would fix tanks and just changes that would be very good for the tank roll. And by pure chance, I happened to kind of be predicting some of these changes here. And I thought I'd throw it at the end of this video because that video took like 4 hours to make and I thought it was a really good video. I wanted to just throw those highlights at the end of this one, so that's what will be at the end of this video in case you're wondering. Moving on though, some of these changes are absolutely awesome, don't get me wrong. I really like this patch as a whole. I think they've finally managed to address a lot of things that we've been waiting for Blizzard to address for longer than a month, which was when we got the last PTR patch. So I'll go through what I think we should keep an eye on when testing this on the PTR, because that's pretty dang important, and giving feedback and so on to Blizzard and keeping these things in mind, especially when these changes hit live servers, is super key to getting a good feedback loop in and getting some nice changes into the game. And let's begin with D.Va, because I think these defense matrix changes are pretty good. I've tried them out on the PTR quite a bit to see where we're at and what it actually feels like, because what it's like on paper versus what it feels like can be pretty different. The delay before regeneration begins is nice and all, but it's barely noticeable. However, overall, with the regeneration rate and so on, you do feel like you have it back a little bit quicker. Now, the question here is really, did D.Va not have defense matrix for long enough to get it with someone like Winston for Winston and D.Va to be viable? Or did she actually have defense matrix for long enough but it was too difficult to work with Winston in the current meta around that? To be honest, I don't really feel like this necessarily changes the situation on its own, but paired with some of the other changes in this patch, it's alright. But I was a little bit surprised to not see a more sort of creative, outside of the box thinking type of change to D.Va here. But when we're talking about D.Va, we kind of have to talk about Winston, and that's what I want to go to now. So Winston now, with this PTR patch, will have his barrier projector, the big bubble shield, duration increased from 6 seconds to 9 seconds. This is great and all, but let's talk about what's actually difficult to do with Winston and D.Va versus the current tanks. So the main thing is that D.Va has a very difficult time protecting Winston enough for a Sigma and Orisa to not just sustain that initial jump on them, especially if they have characters like Baptiste and Reaper and other high damage characters around to help them out to just melt D.Va and Winston down. If you look at these changes as pure changes to Winston and D.Va alone, not counting the rest of the patch notes, I wouldn't really say that these changes are actually that useful for where we're at with the current meta. But this is where I think it's really key to look at the rest of the patch notes, and this is where I'm starting to not really have issues with the patch, but rather have some second thoughts about my initial reaction to it. So first up, Sigma. Okay, so what's changed with Sigma with Winston and D.Va trying to go into Sigma, right? That's what we're talking about. First off, Kinetic Grasp no longer blocks Chain Hook and Whip Shot, not related to Winston and D.Va really at all. Gravitic Flux, high gravity effect duration reduced from 1.2 to 0.9 seconds. Again, pretty nice change, but doesn't really affect that situation either. Experimental Barrier, regeneration rate reduced from 175 to 150 per second, now has a 1 second cooldown after recalling the barrier, initial 0.2 second cast time removed. Now, the 1 second cooldown after recalling the barrier is the only thing that really affects Winston and D.Va here, because they dive past the shields. If Sigma has to replace it, then okay, cool. Winston doesn't really care either way, and D.Va is most likely not going to be there to try and kill that shield anyway. Whilst it might mean that you can get a little bit of extra damage in his D.Va, it again doesn't actually really help Winston and D.Va that much. To some degree, you could even argue that this actually helps Orisa Hog become more meta again, rather than Winston and D.Va to come back into the game a bit. Orisa's 1 extra second on the cooldown definitely does impact the character, but not that much, and with Sigma being nerfed as well, Orisa still being alright, and actually Hog being brought forward a bit with Sigma being worse and getting that extra ammo, we could actually be looking at Orisa Hog making a little bit of a comeback. So I just really hope that I'm kind of proven wrong and that this is enough for Winston to come back into the game properly. Either way, it'll be really interesting to see what actually happens here. But the reason as to why I want to highlight this is because you have this D.Va and Winston versus Sigma Orisa situation going on, where we want the tank meta to just be shaken up a bit. And if you look at Orisa and Sigma changes currently, these changes just don't really do that. They don't actually really change D.Va and Sigma's situation here that much. So in my opinion, it's actually more down to Lucio, Mercy, Moira, Doomfist, Symmetra and Tracer here, and these changes to actually affect the game enough for the meta to shift, because personally I don't think these other changes are enough. We've had these other metas in the past where characters have been super established into the game and we've seen smaller tweaks to them and they rarely actually do anything. Unless there's key things here and there, or a new character being introduced at the same time, or a big rework to a character being introduced at the same time, we don't tend to see those big shifts. I've seen some people talk about people perceiving Winston to be worse currently than he is, and that this patch will bring enough of a spotlight to Winston so he's played more, and I really hope that's the thing too. D.Va is awesome in my opinion. I'm super happy to see a Tracer buff. I didn't know those actually existed. Winston and D.Va changes, that's awesome. Maybe we can get a little bit of dive when people really want to. But other than that, there's not really a lot of things in here that will actually affect those characters and those situations enough for me to at least believe in a proper switch up. I think we're still gonna see quite a lot of far back bunkering up with a decent amount of shields at least, with heavy damage, and that's still gonna be difficult for D.Va and Winston to deal with. But a lot of the time, Overwatch meta can be a lot about the perceived meta rather than the actual absolute best composition, so we'll see what happens, I guess. I'm really hoping for the best here, and to some degree, the Mercy Valkyrie change is actually one of the more interesting ones to me here. With Mercy Valkyrie, the extra beams created by Valkyrie now ignore enemy barriers. That's almost more interesting to me because that's what's really gonna support a potential dive in my opinion. So seeing these Lucy speed boost changes and Mercy, I can see those together with Winston and D.Va maybe being able to do something, but honestly it's very hard to say there. I wouldn't say that it's one of those things where this patch just fixes everything, but I'm glad it's a bit of a step in the right direction at least. The problem I have with it really is that if it's gonna take another month to get the next step in this whole tank crisis debacle or whatever you want to call it, then we're gonna start burning out a little bit there. And that's when Overwatch tends to suffer the most. Hopefully BlizzCon and other things like that can tie us over and make up for that, but either way, it's something I wanted to express so when these changes go live and when they're tested now on the PTR, people are aware of them, test them, give feedback to Blizzard, and when they're live, you don't just pick up D.Va and Winston and hope that that's gonna fix everything, because you're probably gonna need a whole lot more to actually make a difference there. Anyway, that's it for this video. I wanted to highlight something a little bit different. Like I said, at the end of this, starting now, I'll be showing something that I made in a previous video on Monday, kind of predicting some of these changes, and you'll see how ridiculous it is really. I made this video and it was essentially right as it was done that the actual PTR patch hit, so yeah, a bit unlucky, a few hours wasted for me, but whatever. Thanks for watching, we'll see you guys next time, bye bye. Hey guys, my name is Miska and welcome to Overwatch Central. Imagine that Blizzard made a balance patch that's perfectly tailored towards helping characters like Winston come back and helping diversifying the tank lineup. Beginning with D.Va. Over time, D.Va was nerfed quite a bit, just the past sort of year or so, or maybe even longer. When Winston's in there too, it's even more difficult to make this work. This is an area that I think Blizzard should look at ASAP, because this does not just affect the D.Va as a character and how popular she is, but also directly how viable Winston is to play. But Sigma just shuts her down in a lot of different ways. The shield is extremely versatile for Sigma. You can throw a rock just directly at D.Va and she can't defense matrix it or anything like that. The crit box for D.Va is pretty huge too, so just as a tank in general compared to Sigma, she doesn't fare as well there in a fight. Things like the Rodok hook not going through when Sigma is using his absorb or suck ability. As soon as Sigma loses his shield or is not able to like block a Rodok hook directly, I feel like he should be punished for that. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it only nerf Sigma and don't touch Orisa. Orisa is definitely also in an incredibly strong spot right now, and it's just a little bit too consistent and almost too easy to play in the current tank climate. Winston presses jump and goes straight into other characters, he's pretty exposed right there. Even if you have your shield down, you can only shield down for so long before your shield either breaks. Thanks, Jeff, but my video is worthless now.